So we have a bit of a problem today
Oh, Mikkel, what is it now?
because we've once again started recording and doing all the great intros before we actually hit record.
That's right.
So I was basically thinking, we have a Catie, you're with us today, and do you have a fun intro, something wonderful, funny, obscure happened lately you can share with us?
Wow. So this is your intro? You just,
I'm
hand it off to someone
pawning it
else.
off.
Wonderful, funny, or obscure. I would say those could be three very different angles that we could take here, whether we're going
Yes.
wonderful, funny,
Yes.
or obscure. I don't know, obscure, something that a lot of people don't know about me is I took a 5-year gap year after high school and lived in Australia, traveled around the world, spent a lot of time in some very, very random parts of the world before I went to university and started anything that would look or feel like a professional
5 years.
career. Yeah.
5 years.
My parents were obviously slightly challenged with that decision.
Yeah.
It's worked
I was
out
about
okay
to
in
say
the end.
that. Did you do like, so this is interesting. Did you do like something specific? So a friend of mine, kind of from a while back, he spent a year in Australia as well. And I think he became a crab diver or something like this, or pearl diver or something.
Mine was not quite that interesting. So I went to work for a nonprofit for 6 months. So that was actually was supposed to be the gap year. And then I fell in love with the work that they were doing and the opportunity to travel, because I grew up in small town Tennessee. I had literally never left the country, never seen the world. So I was very attached to the mission and the opportunity. So I ended up working and volunteering with that nonprofit for almost 5 years.
Pretty
Well,
cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching the show where it's funny. It's the two kids in their 20s sailing around the world, spending 3 years on it. And then their parents are super supportive because they were also sailors. And they were like, yeah, you can't learn the experiences they're getting. You can't learn that in school. You're going to meet so many different cultures. And so I think it's pretty cool, actually. You've been taking that step. I was just super boring and went straight to school, and then straight to work. It's like, no.
It's called ambitious. Okay.
I don't know about that. I just needed to get it over with, I guess.
Both tracks can work out very, very well. So there's no perfect.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yes.
Anyway, so you are CRO at Walnut, which we're going to talk a bit about today. I always scan through like who's the guest, where they've been. Pretty cool. I didn't see that story. Your gap year on LinkedIn, but you
That was why I picked it as part of my intro. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. But you mentioned Sangam. You've worked at Demand Base. I can see. I believe he's also worked at Demand Base.
So Sangram and I actually overlapped when I was at Pardot. He was exact target. So we were both at Salesforce.
Okay.
There you go.
We actually did our onboarding together in Indianapolis. So it was fun.
And also so you mentioned you're from Atlanta, actually. Or
Yeah, we
you
both live in Atlanta as well.
Yeah. So that, there's another little bit of an overlap there. I'm not sure. But anyway. But you were also at Pendo, which is kind of a pretty cool kind of team. And then obviously, Marketo and so forth, right? So, I mean, you have seen a couple of very successful companies from the inside, granted, not always being the CEO, obviously, kind of that part of the career track, right? And I think Walnut now the first like CRO job, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you are correct. This is the first time, and I just hit my 90-day mark, so still very new in the CRO seat.
There you go.
And if you've been living under a rock, Walnut is an interactive demo platform. Am I saying that right? That's kind of how to position
Perfect.
it.
You nailed it.
Kind of the first, I believe the first one to create it as well.
Yeah, we're definitely creating that category. I will say it has grown and accelerated very quickly over the last just over 3 years, about 3.5 years. But yeah, it's always a little bit fuzzy in terms of who got started first, but at least from a funding perspective or what we can figure out on paper, I think we were the first.
Yeah.
If you say it on this show, then it's by default documented you were first.
Absolutely.
So just to kind of just to be clear,
Hands down,
but
100% we're the first.
yes,
Yeah.
and I think what you guys are pretty, I don't know, famous for, I would say, there's this with the We Are Prospects campaign, right? I think that kind of still resonates with me a lot. Then there is this, at least I still know it, is the cat and the lion, the before and after LinkedIn ad,
Yes.
like very, very successful, right? And then there was something else that I'm now actually forgetting. Damn it, what was that? Oh, it was the video. The very high quality produced, commercial basically, where the one guy says, "I wasted my best years on demos,"
I love not just that you guys have done your homework, but I love the specific homework because you were highlighting all of the best things.
It's also just now, if a listener out there hasn't seen it yet, they Google it, go on YouTube, watch it. It's hilarious. but also a lot of the other podcasts anyone from Walnut has been on, I feel like that's what's been covered. And actually something has happened since then. You raised the Series B, a pretty decent round, as I recall. And then obviously that money needs to get deployed to grow and get to the next stage. And that's actually what we wanted to talk with you about today, which is pretty exciting. So I haven't seen anyone do that yet. So you're going to hear it here first. So thanks so much for joining. I think what would be really helpful for the listener out there, probably they have an outside glimpse of the company. But can you maybe share us a little bit, what does the go-to-market team look like today? What is the setup you have, just to get a feel for the mechanics of the business?
Yeah, sure. Maybe one other thing that I'll kind of just to set the stage, because you're correct. We've talked a lot, and Yoav, our CEO and founder, is just so phenomenal at telling all of the early stories, which everything you just mentioned, we are prospects, and the videos and the memes and the cat are all a big part of. But the thing that I think that we haven't talked about a ton yet is how that connects really to the mission that we're on. And you called out, obviously, that it's an interactive demo platform, but really our fundamental belief, and you see it if you've watched the We Are Prospect videos or other things online, but we just think B2B go-to-market is fundamentally broken. So the experience of buying software as a B2B buyer is really challenging. And we made it very funny in the We Are Prospects, but it's all very true in the experience that you have typically with a seller and with demoing a piece of software, and that entire buyer journey can be really horrendous. Of course, it can be great in some pockets, but historically, and kind of if you think of the standard, it's just not awesome. So that's really what we're all about as a business. And for us, that demo is the fundamental piece. It's kind of that starting point of how do we empower someone to interact with your product or your piece of software. And it's not even always just in that live demo moment, but think about pieces of software that you guys have bought, everything from how you're interacting with live product tours on a website and microsites, and how you might be getting educated via an email that comes, a few hours or a few days before that first call, via an interactive demo or clicking through a product, how you're interacting with the product on live calls, the follow-up, how you're onboarded to learn about using that product as well. So it's all about really unlocking kind of those magical moments, but in a much more buyer-centristic way.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that ties directly to your question in terms of how I'm running go-to-market, what we're doing as a business, is it's a really hard problem to solve. So it's easy to talk about, let's just make your demos suck less. And of course, we've built some really cool technology that helps make your demos much more personalized, much more interactive. But when we think about transforming the entirety of the B2B go-to-market and buying process, there's so many layers and there's a lot of complexity there. So it's the most simple way to answer kind of what we've been focused on since that last round of funding and deploying the capital is, what's our point of view and perspective on the entirety of that buying journey, and then what are the areas where we feel like we have a role to really helping to solve those. And I feel like you have a question before I keep going. I can see it on your face.
No, I feel like because a couple of the campaigns on the top funnel were super successful for you guys. That must have resulted in a lot of not only interest, but also people really having the intent to buy, right? Not just oh wow, cool new brand, really really well done, but oh, let me check this out, and maybe even go further in the funnel, right? So I would assume that probably early days, you got a lot of tailwind from the great marketing work that was, has been produced basically. And then I wonder how this is evolving, right? Because it's, this one S curve, and, maybe it's still going, maybe it's not. I'm not sure kind of where you guys are in this. But then there's always this, okay, let's layer on the next thing, right? And really kind of these additions. And I know, it's an Israeli, founded company, but very much in the US right now, right? Also with you kind of leading the commercial team there. But tell us a little bit more about, how the setup works and, what the challenges were and kind of layering another revenue motion potentially on top of this and so forth, right? I think that would be, that would give some nice background in terms of the complexity of the beast that you're maneuvering there.
Yeah. And we are Israeli headquartered and founded. We're about half and half. So about half of the company is based in Tel Aviv or close by. And then half is spread out across North America, primarily in the US. So the entire revenue org that I lead is based in North America. And so that makes up support, customer success, sales, pre-sales, pretty much everything that's customer facing or touching the revenue motion outside of marketing. So marketing does not report into me, but every other aspect of go-to-market does.
The question on top of this is really, well, there was a lot of inbound happening at first, right? Did you kind of build additional channels on top now, or kind of tell us a little bit more about I guess you guys got to product market fit extremely fast, right? Kind of that happened kind of extremely quickly. And now, we're not going to talk about specific ARR numbers, but let's just say you're in the go-to-market fit stage, right?
Yeah.
Really kind of scaling this up, figuring out what's the repeatable playbook. Can you share a little bit, how that works and how you're kind of going through those motions in Walnut?
And you're 100% correct. We had these amazing tailwinds early on that certainly gave us a sense of like, yes, we're absolutely are finding product market fit very quickly. Remember, this is before my time, but I've heard all the stories, so I feel like I was there for the ride, even though I wasn't there for the early days. But it's an incredible opportunity and a blessing, but it can also be a challenge when you find yourself in that scenario where you very much are reacting to demand in the market very quickly. And for us, because of the space that we play in and the product that we sell and that we develop, it works really, really well and is super applicable for small companies, mid-sized companies, large companies, Fortune 100 brands. So we had companies of all shapes and sizes coming to us and wanting to try it out. We obviously had some very strategic design partners early on that helped to shape kind of the platform that we were building and ensuring that we were solving the right problems. But we did get to a place of feeling like there's certainly product market fit. There's a ton of interest in this space. This is a category that's absolutely going to blow up. And so for that really the entirety of those first 2 years, we were really just riding that wave of doing the absolute best that we could to keep up with demand and react to that. And to your question, the next phase and what we've been working on, and certainly it started before I joined, but it's very much why they brought on a CRO and are looking to build out kind of the next phase of that revenue engine, is this aspect of how do we anchor everything around customer centricity and then also be very purposeful at what are the right problems that we're solving, who are we solving them for, and what areas do we want to be absolute best in class at, because it's no surprise to you guys what the problems that a 25-person startup are solving are different than a problem that Adobe is solving across their B2B go-to-market org. And they're both really valid problems and super interesting and lots of great opportunity. But because we were serving such a large number of customers and almost entirely coming to us inbound, there wasn't quite the level of focus that we needed to put in place to be able to get to the next level. And so while we're going to continue absolutely to ride that marketing wave and try to be best in class when it comes to building brand and creating the category, for us, this next phase is about being very, very clear on our ICP, what we're building for, the key individuals that we want to lean in. And for us, that'll look like a customer advisory board and just getting a lot more strategic with anchoring around the right personas and individuals within those revenue orgs to ensure that we're tightening up the foundation so we can really build that outbound motion in addition to the inbound motion.
I'm going a little bit off script, and
as usual.
Maybe that's not allowed here. But this is maybe almost kind of a sensitive question, right? Because you've been there now for 90 days. Half of the company is in Tel Aviv in Israel, and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on there right now, right? So kind of how did this affect Walnut? Actually, kind of is there a little bit more of a shift now to the US side, because that's maybe a little bit more stable right now in terms of just the employees and what they can focus on. I'm guessing kind of that kind of I don't want to call it a disruption, but that kind of event obviously must have shook not only the country but also the go-to-market org and the company at the same time, right? So kind of managing through that as a CRO, plus having all the pressure of, hey, this is a rocket ship, startup company, and you have all those expectations. That must be a really difficult mix of challenges to manage through, right?
Yeah, so interesting timing to say the least. I signed my offer letter to join Walnut 2 days before October 7th, so literally before the war broke out. The go-to-market focus into the US is not new, so it's been the core of where our customers and our sales and revenue team have been based from very early on in the company. So that decision was made even before I was hired. They clearly were looking for a CRO in the US because of that. But yes, the dynamic of what's gone on and continues to go on in Israel certainly has added complexity. Even to the point that key individuals on our executive team were pulled into the reserves, and there was a lot of disruption in terms of how to do the work, and we're running calls. And my first day on the job, we ran our management meeting, and it was 10:30 p.m. for the Israeli team, because that was the only hour that they could all be on a Zoom because of numbers that were involved in literally life and death scenarios and situations.
Yes.
So it certainly added complexity. I also had planned to spend my second and third week in Tel Aviv, so getting to know the management team in person. I had the opportunity to meet Yoav during my interview process, so I had met the CEO in person, but I hadn't met anyone else. And we had to push that back a bit because of safety reasons. I was able to go to Tel Aviv 4 weeks ago. I went for the first time, and we finally got to do the management offsite and spent a lot of time. The team is incredible. The office is incredible. The city is incredible. Such amazing, resilient, phenomenal human beings. So I won't take us further off course because I could talk much more about the topic. But it has certainly, to your question, added a layer of complexity that I did not expect or plan for when I signed the offer letter and made the decision.
So sometimes when you bring on a senior role like you, it's also to build something very specific or achieve something very specific, right? And you mentioned you have a lot of sales experience. You're located in the US and the focus is on US. So it sounds to me like the focus for Walnut right now is to build up the outbound motion because inbound is working with emphasis on US. Is that kind of, did I read that right? Yeah.
Yep. So it's to build out the outbound motion. It's also to be very specific and targeted in our various segment motions. So we've had more of a one size fits all approach because we were primarily reacting to inbound demand. So building out the right motions that are scalable and efficient and customer centric for small companies, mid-sized companies, and large companies for sure.
And I'm curious, like how far are you in that process of building out outbound? Did it start with you you as a hire, and now you're going to go build it, or was there already an initiative just to get a feel for where are we in the process of building up?
We've already 100% cracked the code. We've got it all flowing perfect now.
There you go.
So there's go-to-market fit.
Absolutely, we have a ton of work to do there, and it was already in motion, and it was a key topic of conversation before I joined. It was something that we were very aware that we needed to get more sophisticated, more strategic. Back to very much fundamentals, building a clear target account list, identifying your core personas, and then having very specific messaging for each. We had started some of that, but being a very new category and a category that's evolving as quickly as ours is, there definitely was some additional work that needed to be done. So that's where we focused a lot of my first 3 months has been really about let's nail what we've spent a lot of time in data, wanting to make sure we're making the right decisions in terms of really what's the core of the ICP from both a company perspective as well as the personas, so that we're then building the right target account list and layering a little bit of technology on to make sure that we are, because we don't have a massive sales organization, we don't have a massive BDR team. We're trying to be lean just like everyone else. So if we're going to go focus, we've also seen the stats like. It takes about 10 times as many emails to get responses as it did even 18 months ago. Cold calling's making this interesting resurgence. We've all got to figure out how to use AI differently. So when we talk about even the word outbound, I think there's this assumption that you sort of just build a list and throw bodies at it, and then you're going to book some meetings. And it's become quite a bit more complex than that in terms of what is, I really think of it as everything is an all-bound motion. There is how marketing and sales and entire go-to-market are working together. But yeah, we are still very much in the early innings of defining what that looks like for us and building it.
Yeah, very, very cool, very interesting. Thank you for the background, actually, because that sets us nicely up for kind of the next chapter here, actually, which is... can you tell us a little bit, what are the rituals or what are the cadences or what are the recurring events, the recurring meetings, if you will, that you're running in order to organize that whole thing, right? Because, you kind of nicely used the all-bound word here, which, we could probably spend an hour discussing that now. But ultimately it means is a lot of different influences then that lead to a sales process and lead to a new customer, right? And that needs orchestration, right? So what are the I started liking using the rituals word here, actually. What are the rituals that you guys are using in order to actually organize this?
It's such a great question, and I love that you're using the term rituals. And I would say in full transparency that we don't have all of the rituals yet.
Yeah.
So a lot of my first 3 months has been very much listening, learning, asking a ton of questions, digging into the data. And of course, we're making a lot of decisions around that. But we just kicked off our new fiscal year, Feb 1. And so a lot of what we're in very much early stages of in flight is building out those rituals and that cadence and what are the right meeting structure and the right communication cadence. And it does add even another layer of complexity because half of the team, a big part of which is marketing that supports that go-to-market motion based in Tel Aviv. So what do we do async? When do we connect live? We have a revenue kickoff the week after next. So my whole team's getting together in Miami. Of course, a handful of the folks from Tel Aviv are joining as well. And so that's going to be very much the kickoff, not just in name, but also the kickoff of a lot of the rituals that you're describing. I mean, even down to the lens of how often we meet together as a team. I feel like some of the things that we all remember being really intentional in the early days of COVID, because for many of us, it was the first time we were running teams virtually. And now we've been doing this for years. And so we get really sloppy, at least in my experience. I see we pay attention less to when was the last time we got together socially and talked about things that weren't part of, a work discussion or didn't do a pipeline review. Like, what's the structure in terms of exactly how we're kicking off meetings to ensure that people are engaged and focused, and how much time are we spending on walking one-on-ones versus on camera? So some of those fundamentals are also the things that, because my team is now in the US pretty much fully distributed, so we don't have a true hub model. I've got a group that's together in Boston. I've got a handful of folks in New York, a couple folks together in Salt Lake, but everyone else is pretty much on their own, spread out in the US. So our revenue kickoff is going to be the first full gathering of the entire team since I joined. I've been able to meet almost all of them in person, so I've been on a lot of airplanes since joining. But we will start the cadence of quarterly meetups around a WeWork or a hub location, so that we're putting QBRs and some consistent face-to-face meetings in place. But that's going to be in terms of like my team specifically. I think the piece you'll probably be more interested in when you say, rituals or how you're running that. I mean, things like, we'll call it a funnel working group, but like every single individual that owns aspects of pipeline, how often do we get together and review every aspect of those numbers? It'll be bi-weekly. We've just started the process of even finalizing what those dashboards look like. This is something I learned from my demand-based days. They were just absolutely best in class at this, because pipeline at demand-based and truly the best organizations everywhere, pipeline's always a team sport. The entire company owns it. Like, we are in this thing together and we've got shared goals. And of course, if you can be sophisticated at how you're measuring where everything comes from to understand how to optimize, that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, we've got to understand how much pipeline do we need, and then what are all the mechanisms as that rolls through the funnel that we can work to optimize to maximize revenue. So we'll have bi-weekly cadences that review that really from top to bottom. So everything from top of the funnel, the quality of MQLs, and then every piece of that funnel, not just to the close of the deal, but also the post-sale experience, which for us is also at the core of our revenue, our go-to-market motion.
I would love to double click on this one actually a little bit. And maybe that doesn't need to be, what is it exactly that you're doing on Walnut now or planning to do, right? Because some of that still is forming basically. You also mentioned, hey, we did the very similar thing at Demand Base, for example. I think this could be a really cool nugget for people to take away, because I totally agree with you. Like, pipe gen is the number one problem for everyone out there, whether they know it or not, right?
Yeah.
I think the lesser so sophisticated teams that haven't figured this out, they're always talking about, the reps and they're not closing enough and they're lazy and that's why we're not hitting target. I think it's all BS. I think the real reason is they don't have enough to work on. That's the problem. That's why they're not actually being able to, hit their targets. And yes, sure, you can still optimize, pipe to close, and there's lots of optimization potential and, to teach those reps and enable those reps. But ultimately, you can have the best reps, but if you don't have any, pipeline, it's not going to work out, right? So let's talk a little bit more about this. I think you call it did you call it the pipeline council, or did I just imagine this?
Funnel working group is what I called it.
The funnel working group.
The fun group.
The fun group. This
There
is
you
the
go.
marketing guy right here.
Yeah, that was demand-based naming, so I take no credit, but that was what we called it.
So can we just double click a little bit on this? Can you, and maybe it's from demand base, how did a typical meeting look like? Who was involved? Who was talking? That would be super interesting.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't prepped to talk about this, but I love it. Great topic. So we had a head of marketing ops, and this was a handful of years ago, so many things I'm sure have changed at demand-based since. But our head of marketing ops was just this phenomenal world-class individual. So she had owned and orchestrated the dashboards and the data that we reviewed. So she would run the meeting, kick it off with very high level stats, and we would look at the entirety of current quarter and next quarter pipeline. And then we would look at the stages and understand how things were progressing. And we of course had, and this can be super sophisticated or I think super basic. On Walnut will be a little bit more basic than some of these, but we had very clear metrics at demand base for every different type of pipeline that we were building, and then what that needed to look like for the different segments of the business. Because obviously enterprise deals take longer to close than mid-market, than SMB. So we had metrics and baselines around all of those, but it literally took us probably 8 minutes on a weekly basis to have a very clear snapshot of where we were winning and where we were behind. And we had a sense of what was coming around the corner that we needed to be very hyper aware of or concerned. And almost every frontlines, certainly every second line, but most frontline sales leaders were in this meeting as well. So it was a relatively large group. So it had to be efficient. So it wasn't a waste of time. But it was, everyone had a sense of whether you're running it or not. Like, I know where we're at, I know where the challenges are, and I know where we're winning and where we're really leaning in from a business. So that was the initial structure. And then from there, we looked at, and this might be one piece of the statement you just made that I don't know if disagree is the right word, but when we talk about pipeline or go to market being a team sport, like, yes, 100%. If you don't have the pipeline to work with, then it doesn't matter what you do at all the other stages. It's just fundamentally broken. So you've got to figure out how to fix that as a first. But then there are so many other mechanisms, because in that same meeting, there would be conversations where, hey, we're ahead of all of the top of the funnel goals, but yet we're missing on second stage opportunities. So we're hitting MQLs and SQLs, or we're hitting this first phase and this second phase, but something's falling off a cliff in this segment right here. And then you've got the frontline leader or the second line leader that leads that team. And then they're giving some context. Hey, we're seeing this new competitor that's popping up. And we were always able to get calls from this stage to this stage. And now we're getting kicked in the teeth on pricing. I'm just using an example here, but there's also this kind of on the ground context around, here's where we're really struggling. And then in a perfect world, you've got someone from enablement that's also paying attention and thinking, I can help them fix that. Or you've got someone in product marketing that's thinking, I know a solve for that. Oh, we're having an issue with this part of pricing. I wonder if we tweaked this one thing and got it into the field really quickly. Now we're optimizing not just for the broken piece that's at the top of the funnel, which is super important if that's behind, but also this thing that we've identified mid-funnel that if we don't fix it quickly, at least in this segment, like we do not have a path to be successful this quarter or next. So I think the whole thing is very much connected.
So, I mean, how many people were in this room when this happened? Or, maybe virtually?
It was virtual. We were doing it over Zoom. I think it was probably 22, 23.
Yeah, that's exactly actually how it sounds like. So number one, this is great for, it's almost alignment actually also, right? Because you have you said first or second line sales leaders. You had your top funnel folks, probably marketing, maybe your SDR outbound team leaders as well, and so forth, right? I mean, this is a full-on alignment session, basically kind of where you are today and what needs to happen in order to hit your target. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Now it maybe was an hour long, 20 people in there, few people were probably talking. Was there kind of a culture of, let's just say, calling out, and I don't want to say, blaming and shaming or something like this, but was there a culture of like, hey, we are behind on this area and this is your area and you need to now go and fix it? Or was it more like a collaborative thing? And maybe you're just saying it's a collaborative thing, but really kind of a culture of, okay, there's a problem over there, and that problem is probably going to result in X amount of revenue, that we are missing by the end of the quarter and end of next quarter. Let's all brainstorm. How could we find that money elsewhere? What was that? What was kind of the modus operandi in order to work through those issues?
I love the question. And from my perspective, to have a true culture of collaboration, there also has to be a culture of accountability. That's what you're describing. Yeah. Like, if something is broken and one team owns it, then there has to be a sense of how do we fix it? And yes, there should be an all hands on deck approach of what else can we do? How do we rally around this problem? But there does have to be a clear owner and some semblance of, hey, I don't have an answer here in this meeting. I don't know why this thing has fallen off the cliff or why we're struggling here. But by this meeting 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have an answer, and I'm going to have a follow-up in the meantime. I may have some additional questions. I may have some asks, but a sense of accountability in terms of where things have gone awry and at least what the goal is in terms of who's going to own fixing them for sure. And I think it can also, because what I just described at Demandbase was obviously much more sophisticated than what we'll put in place at Walnut. We're just a really small team. We have a lot less individuals when you think about, people in those leadership roles that own those various pieces. But I think you can accomplish the exact same level of transparency that leads to alignment, that leads to accountability, that leads to really strong execution. Those are all very much connected, whether you're talking about a group of 5 or a group of 55 in a much larger company.
No, exactly. And I would even argue, right, the numbers of zeros that you have there on the pipeline, it doesn't actually, that's not indicative of whether or not you can use that tactic, right? I think where it starts to become really important is you have multiple channels, maybe in multiple regions. It gets a little bit fuzzy there, and it gets a little bit difficult to drive accountability on that part. In order then to also say, well, this is green, but this is red. What are we going to do about this? And the consequence is going to be X. I think there needs to be a bit of a data baseline below that, I would say, kind of to have a conversation. But ultimately, the accountability, the collaboration, the transparency, and then the attitude of let's go fix it. I think that's actually what the outcome is. That's actually what you want to have, right? The sophistication below that is only enabling that to a degree.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So one thing that's kind of lurking in my head, you raised 35 million, what, year and a half ago, something like this?
So we're back to Walnut.
We're back to Walnut. That's the thing. You raised 35 million. You're focused on building the US market. Outbound is kind of the new motion, right? How are you approaching this next phase of growth? Because there's also, I imagine, a lot of challenges that come with it. It sounds like mainly inbound driven. That team doesn't sit under you. It sits in Israel as well. And you're building out an outbound motion. So did I get that right, or?
The inbound folks do all report into me. So sellers and BDRs do work in my org. And yeah, just to clarify, we don't have this massive separate team that's fielding all the inbound. Like we don't have this big SDR org that's reporting into marketing because a majority of the lead flow that comes in goes directly to AEs. Remember, we're trying to fix this broken buying process. So we're trying to minimize the number of individuals you have to talk to if you actually want to get a demo of the software or learn about and buy Walnut. So most of them, it's all reporting straight into me, and it's about really optimizing that experience. But I think what you're getting at is that breakdown of if you've got a marketing team that I don't own directly, but we've been very, very dependent on that marketing engine. How do you slowly shift away from that while not shifting away from that? I think that was maybe the crux of your question.
That was exactly where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, I can read your minds even over Zoom. And it's an interesting challenge, and it's an interesting opportunity because I think that we are so incredibly privileged to be in this building stage where we've been able to build on the back of phenomenal inbound demand. But it requires a ton of alignment between myself, our head of marketing, our head of demand gen, of working very even right now, we're finalizing the financial plan for the year ahead. And so part of that is the entire marketing waterfall. I had to spend a lot of time getting up to speed on what are all of our historicals. And guess what? Our historicals were different in 2022 than they were in 2023. 2023 was a tough year for anyone selling into software companies. So looking at what changed, what were the mechanisms, what are things that went really well, how much did we have to spend for every single lead that came in? Like what's the dollars and cents plans that are going to get us to the percentage of inbound that we feel like is going to drive us to the number this year? So that's definitely not a me planning versus a him planning. We're planning it together because it's got to all be one cohesive plan.
Got it. And I'm also just curious because you said you're trying to run a really lean machine with as few people involved, but do you still run the classic SDR outbound meeting booking and then pass off to AE? That's, I'm guessing, still part of the motion.
We have a really small team of SDRs that do only outbound demand generation. So they're the beginning of that as we're building the outbound motion. We don't currently have SDRs that are fielding inbound demand.
So actually, this was one of my next questions. So maybe sidetrack. So Drift and Salesloft, they just merged, completely different topic. But Drift, very, very, early on, they had this no forms thing, and they should everything should be done through their chatbot, right? And from folklore by now, it's like, well, they kind of scrapped all the forms. They have forms back now, by the way, but they scrapped all the forms because hey, you need to be aligned with your message, right? You guys are talking about the sales pros or the go-to-market pros is fundamentally broken, and that there's this whole demo thing. How does that affect your own go-to-market? How do you live your own vision actually, and how do you eat your own dog food or drink your own champagne in that sense? Kind of how does that translate back to what you do specifically in your go-to-market that probably other teams either haven't figured out yet or simply are not woken up yet to the new way of how buyers actually want to interact with your brand?
It's literally the most important thing I've been focused on since day one is how do we make my go-to-market org the absolute best power users of Walnut at every stage of the buying process in the universe. So we're not yet currently there, but there are a lot of interesting, super positive things that we do with our products. And it is some of those examples I gave earlier on in the call. It's how do you connect the entire experience of how someone's interacting with, product tours that are on your website, the various things that they're interacting with via email. So my team, they use Walnut to build, we call them walnuts, but you can think of a walnut as just some version of an interactive demo. So they send walnuts in their pre-meeting emails that go out. So if you've booked an inbound meeting with us, you're going to get a walnut at least a day before that meeting that's going to capture some small piece of our product, get you interested. Then we're going to use our product also to understand, did you click through any piece of that interactive demo? If you did, that rep is going to know what you spent time on, what you were interested in. They're going to use that as part of the conversation. Of course, we showed examples of customers in our first demos as well, so you can understand how our customers are using our own product to demo in various different public-facing ways. But then every aspect of the follow-up, the additional conversations that you're having are going to be anchored around some aspect of our product that you were interested in, wanted to learn more about, wanted to test. So you've got it at your fingertips throughout the entire buying process.
I love this. And maybe this is unpopular now, but to a degree, what you're kind of enabling there is you give mid-market enterprise companies or people that sell to mid-market enterprise companies with like maybe fairly complex products, you give them a little bit of a sniff of the PLG experience.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you can try, you can trial, you can see it, you can interact with this. You don't have to talk to a seller. You can actually click already here. It's not the right thing, but it's almost the right thing, right? So I think this kind of buyer behavior that has been trained and popularized through this whole PLG movement, basically, to a degree, yes, it's also the product that they're selling, and I'm totally aware of this. But to a degree, kind of that's basically kind of almost what you enable with this customer-centric approach. Like, hey, we're not holding the demo hostage. You don't need to wait for the fifth call to finally see product. We're actually gonna give it before the call, and we're gonna put it on the website, and we're not gonna put all gates around it. We actually want to use it to see what you're interested in, so then we can tailor a better buying experience and probably higher conversion rates, and you've probably all of those ROI arguments handy right now, for then the seller to be more successful, right? Kind of that's almost what you're enabling with this approach, and obviously at the same time, yes, that's also the product that you guys are selling.
And we all throw around the Gartner stat that 75% of buyers want a rep-free experience.
Yeah.
That same report also talks about that those people with a rep-free buying experience end up not buying the right thing and regret the purchase. So there is certainly this perfect in between where, yes, as a buyer, I want to be empowered to do more of the education and more of the experience on my own. But we also acknowledge at Walnut, we're selling something that the product itself is not complex. But when you're talking about impacting or transforming how a company is going to market, that's massively complex. There's change management. Yeah. There are big decisions that have to be made as part of that process. So it's finding that sweet spot of how do we give them access to as much as possible to understand our product and learn about it and experience it every step of the way, so that the conversations we're having as sellers or executives or others that are engaged are the right conversations. They're the impactful conversations versus the 30-minute or 1 hour canned demo that feels exactly the same as every other demo that they've gone through. Like, that's not the best use of their time.
I also wonder, like, with this, while you're kind of shifting the approach to sales to kind of run how you envision sales should run, you also have money you need to deploy to continue the growth trajectory, right? And that sometimes means adding more sales folks onto the team, right? And you said you kind of want to run not scrappy, but you want to run a lean machine, kind of, right? So how do you go about actually scaling that motion, specifically also in the States right now, and knowing whether that's the right bet versus could we do more inbound, or like, so how do you go about basically deploying that those resources to grow the company?
And we're hiring, we're adding headcount. We're just doing it very strategically and purposefully. And we did some growth back right after our initial funding round, or the second funding round a year and a half ago, because we've matured a bit since then, and we're anchoring more on an outbound, all-bound, just a little bit more focused approach. It's a different maybe type of rep that you're interviewing. We're also at a different stage of the market. Things have shifted a bit in the last 2 years. So ensuring that we're hiring the right individuals for the various segments that we sell into, because we've essentially got 3 segments of our business that are different size of companies. And as we think about building that more strategic outbound motion, specifically for us, that's upper mid-market and then the lower end of enterprise. So we're hiring specific reps that we feel like have some experience and some excitement, not just to come in and take over a playbook and replicate what's already been done before, but we're looking for builders for sure, that have an excitement to be at this early stage of a company, someone that's building a category and really helping to create a go-to-market motion as well.
I think that's super interesting because sometimes what you notice happens is company X raises whatever Series A, opens up 20 roles for sales reps, same month almost, right?
Yeah.
And I can't see that going very well in a lot of cases. So being purposeful for me makes a lot of sense. There's another thing kind of layered in there to what you said. Almost, it sounds like the profile you're going after is fundamentally different because you want to create this almost different experience as well. Can you maybe tell us little bit more, like, what's the archetype of the role you're going after? How is it different from what you've seen? I mean, you've been at Marketo and Demand Base, and assume there are some classic profiles you'd go after there versus now.
Well, it's interesting. Some of, at least the interviews that I'm running now and the reps that I'm specifically looking for, they actually do meet some of the criteria of what made a really successful rep at Demand Base or even Marketo back in the day, because they're insanely curious about B2B sales, B2B go-to-market. They have an opinion and a point of view. They didn't just take a sales job because it was like the career path that landed in their lap. Most of us are accidental salespeople, if that's the path that we went down. At least my generation, most of it was an accident. But there is some element of an unlock where like they are genuinely interested in this space and excited to help figure things out and learn and are intellectually curious, versus someone that we've all met these amazing people that could sell anything to anyone. Like you give them some clunky piece of, I don't know, software that's going to sell into a CFO line of business, and they're going to figure it out and they're going to learn how to sell it. Like that's an amazing skill set. That's different than the skill set of a seller that we need at Walnut today. Like we need someone, of course, that's got some sales DNA and sales acumen, but also someone that is fundamentally interested in being in this space of B2B sales, B2B go-to-market. They have some ambitions to grow a career in sales tech specifically, because that's the level of curiosity that's going to take to not just learn our product, but figure out what's B2B go-to-market going to look like in 18 months or 24 months. What does AI really mean for the profession of professional selling? Like there's a lot of big questions that I think we have the potential to be on the forefront of answering. So we need a specific person to help us get there.
Okay, Catie, you know what? I mean, I think this was a really cool conversation. I think we jumped back and forth a little bit, and I hope the audience is able to kind of follow this a little bit. Really interesting to hear, obviously, the difficulties, the complexities surrounding growing Walnut, also in those challenging times right now, right? We talked a little bit about the full funnel council, the funnel team, the funnel meeting, the funnel group at the Mondays. I think
struggling with that one, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was really insightful. Lots to take away for folks listening, I think. And then really talking about this shifting landscape that you're trying to meet with maybe a different or more specific kind of salesperson, actually kind of tackling specifically that part. So really cool to hear all of that stuff. And Catie, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, Mikkel, Tony, it was lovely to meet both of you, and thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Have a good one. Bye-bye.